guys, I'm Chris.
And I'm Mike.
And welcome back to No Limits, a Mitch Rapp podcast. So how you doing this week, Mike?
Hey, I'm good, but I know you have a lot going on with your doctorate and dissertation being done soon, right?
Yeah, I'm about to submit it tomorrow, actually, so
Nice.
that's good. But I'm taking some time to carve out for the pod, so that's always been a nice reprieve from the science.
Indeed. And we got a good book this time. I'm excited about our December book of the month.
We have a great book. What a great book to actually get me motivated to do this, to carve out some time, you know? Like, I don't know how motivated I would have been with, you know, our last book or the previous one. Or I like Separation of Power, but yeah, I'm glad we did Executive Power in November.
Yeah. And then, I mean, we got a great 2 months here with Memorial Day now and then Consent to Kill to kick off 2021. It's going to be a great way to ring in the new year.
It'll be a great time.
Yes, indeed.
But I do have some sad news to tell you. So, you know that Mitch Rapp Lives glass you got me. Of course, Caroline, my wife, gets out a glass to drink water, and she puts it in a place it's not supposed to be. And my son, being the crazy person he is, jumping off like everything, knocks it over, and I hear this crash, and I was like, what glass was that? And she was like, I don't know, just some random glass. Of course, it's my brand new glass, my Mitch Rapp Live glass. I was very sad.
Just an object, man. Just an object.
I know.
It's replaceable.
I know.
Oh.
But I had to tell you that. So.
Yeah. Oh, too bad. Well, I'll keep drinking beer out of mine too. I'll drink double the beer out of mine to make up for it. How about that?
Sounds good. Sounds like a good compromise. So, anyways, we do have a little bit of an admin for you guys before we get into today's show. So, if any of you heard our little announcement we published earlier last week, and then we took it down, we have launched a t-shirt shop with some Mitch Rapp Pod swag. If you wanted to get a t-shirt with our logo, due to some complications, we couldn't put all the stuff on there that we wanted to, but we are still able to sell our t-shirt with the Mitch Rapp Pod logo. If you want to support that, you can go to our shop at Teespring. There's a button on our website, mitchrappod.com. And we still have our promo codes. So for anyone listening to the podcast, they can get 10% off any order placed in the month of December. It's promo code No Limits, as well as our patrons can get a special 25% off, and we'll be sending you that code shortly. So, yeah, just wanted to update you with that. Second, we have our December book giveaway, which is, again, a winner's choice. So we have Executive Power, Pursuit of Honor, Extreme Measures, and Survivor. So these are the only the 4 autographed books that you have left. So if you want to get into that, you can sign up to be a patron, as well as anyone who's already a patron has, you know, their name in that running.
We'll do some giveaway after these 4 autographed books are gone, but I'm not parting with any more of my collection. I think that'll be about 7 or 8 of my autographed Flynn books that we gave away to our patrons and our listeners. So I'm keeping the rest. I'm keeping Memorial Day, keeping American Assassin, Kill Shot, Last Man, Survivor. So I'm not parting with those. So it's your last 4 books that you might win.
Well, I'm sure Rosie was happy that she could get rid of any of them. So that's all that matters.
That's right.
Yeah, and so next, later on this month, we'll be doing, announcing our next philanthropic work that we have planned for the year of 2021. So we look forward to sharing you more about that. As well on that pod, when we announce it, we're going to announce our final donation that we're going to give to the Prostate Cancer Foundation. So we have a decent amount. So yeah, look out for that pod in the future.
Yeah. If you become a patron this month, we will add to our donation total that we will be giving to the fight to end prostate cancer. And then I'm really excited, like you said, Chris, to announce at the end of the calendar year here, our next mission, a really great nonprofit organization we've been partnering with. And just a little hint, it involves 3 of our favorite things: books, troops, and veterans. So pretty awesome charity that we're going to give back to on the podcast.
Nice. So any more admin?
I think that's all the announcements that we have going on. I'm excited. Let's get into it, right? Today we are covering the first half of the 5th book in the Mitch Rapp series and Vince's 6th book overall in the universe, the Rapp universe, and that's Memorial Day. We're going to be getting through the prelude all the way up to chapter 48. It's about the halfway point of the book. And then next week, we'll be giving you our part 2, our final wrap-up of the book, all the way to the very end, with our winners and losers, final rating, our covers discussion. You know, Chris, I got a couple of interesting covers of Memorial Day. Personally, I've never seen before, so next week, I always enjoy talking to you about that.
Yeah, looking forward to that.
Now, since we're starting a book review, I guess you could say my thoughts on this book are best summed up in the form of a double limerick.
You don't say.
What do you think?
Let's hear it.
All right. Interrogating terrorists like a madman, directing Delta Force operations in Pakistan. It's all hands on deck to prevent a terrible wreck. Thank God that Rapp is our point man. This, the 6th book of Flynn, is definitely the linchpin, stimulating the series without Anna and her queries. My favorite all-time thriller this has been.
I'd have to say, Mike, that is probably your best limerick yet.
You think so?
I truly,
Oh.
you know, you throw in some nice descriptions there that, you know, about the book and about, you know, the meta text of the book really brings that home there. I like that.
You know, it's funny. Maybe this is one of my favorite books of all time. Both the nostalgia. If you heard my origin story, I saw this book when I was 15 years old in Barnes & Noble. And it was the first Rapp book. One of the first thrillers I've ever read in the genre. Was completely carried away with it. And it made a big impact on me and how I viewed national security and the Bush administration at the time, and got into politics. I thought I'd be a political science major. And a lot of that is due to this book just as a teenager. So there's that. But also, maybe I also liked it because, as I said, Anna without her queries. We don't have Anna bugging Rapp in this one. Maybe that had a little something to do with it.
Yeah, that's something I definitely wanted to bring up with you, and we can get more into it either later this episode or in our next episode. But yeah, I think the fact that she's not in this, and I know me personally, I don't like her character that much. I know there are other people out there that are not a big fan of Anna Riley or Riley, however you want to say it. But yeah, I think it's one of the strong points, and I hate to say that about, you know, like a female character. Vince tends, we've mentioned this before, Vince tends to struggle to write female characters, although he does a great job, I think, with Irene, and then Kyle has done a great job integrating some female characters. But yeah, Anna just never really sat well with me, and it's no surprise that we get this book that I really think is, you know, Vince here leveling up a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, we were a little down in the last couple books. We loved term limits. We loved transfer of power. And then there was a little lull there in between. And I think, you know, here, reading this, I texted you a couple times and I was just like, wow, this book is really good. Really good.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, I'm not going to disagree with you. In the second limerick, I wrote stimulating the series. Like you said, it levels up. I think this one jumpstarts and really kickstarts who Rapp is and who Rapp's going to come to be. This book really, it stands out. It's something special in the series. So yeah, I'm with you.
All right. Well, we like to start off all of our rereads with just going to Goodreads. This is not, you know, this is just a forum to measure these books. But yeah, so on Goodreads, this Memorial Day has a 4.29. And the summary goes like this. So, fighting terrorism on the foreign ground, CIA super agent Mitch Rapp does whatever it takes to protect American freedom. CIA intelligence has pointed to a major terrorist attack on the United States just as the nation's capital prepares for a grand Memorial Day tribute to the veterans of World War II. Racing to Afghanistan, no, that's wrong. Racing to Pakistan, Mitch Rapp leads a commando raid on all Al-Qaeda stronghold in a remote border village and diffuses plans for a nuclear strike on Washington. The crisis averted, the special ops work's done, but Rapp knows in the face of a new kind of enemy, nothing is as it seems, and it's up to him alone to avert a disaster of unimaginable proportions. So I think one that answers our questions: who writes these? I think fans actually write these, or
Yep.
readers write these, because it's not Afghanistan, it's Pakistan.
Although it's
But
staged in Afghanistan, and they daringly cross the border to this village,
true.
But,
I guess it is technically right, but
yeah.
yeah, that's a good description of where
Well,
we're going to finish today.
This last line, it's up to him alone to avert a disaster of unimaginable proportions. A little put off by that because we see some secondary characters that I really like in this one and who really play a crucial role. Like people we've seen like Skip and Jack Warch, but we meet some new people like the Department of Energy secretary who we really come to like, Reimer, a Department of Energy nuclear scientist and specialist in diffusing the weapons, Hanusek. So I feel like we meet another cast of characters that play a really crucial role in a team effort to stop the disaster. So I don't know. It's up to Rapp alone to stop it. I'm actually glad it's not, that he does have this cast of characters that Flynn writes expertly well. So
yeah, I was going to go into this a little bit more in the winners and losers, but I think one of the big winners of this book is this is one of the first novels that we sort of take a step back from getting a lot of Mitch Rapp. Although I actually put it as a loser because I always want more Rapp. But
sure.
I do think it helps the book. And I think this is sort of the formula going forward is we see a little bit less of Rapp. Right off the bat, we're going to talk about this raid. And, based off his prior experiences, especially in the last book, when he inserted himself into that raid, things went bad. He got shot. But, he stays on that command ship. We're going to get into it in a second. But I think by pulling back Rapp a little bit, he's still, the main character, still has all the main punches, is key in every single element. But I think we're seeing a little bit more, like you said, these minor characters or these secondary characters that make the book a little bit better. There's more depth. I guess, we've, over the past 5 books, 6 books, whatever, we're learning who Rapp is. At this point, we know who he is. And so now we want to learn a little bit more about the universe, building this world.
Exactly. I mean, just to go into how much I love this book, and we're gonna kick off the summary in a minute here, but you open past the dust jacket to the inside cover. It's a map of the National Mall. I'm a map
that was
nerd.
Pretty cool.
I'm an American history geek, and seeing that, I'm like, oh, this is going to be awesome. You open to the back inside cover, or the back cover, if you will, and it's a map of Pakistan and the Afghanistan border, and I'm just loving it right off the bat, having these maps. I don't think we had maps in any of the earlier books. I feel like Term Limits could have done well with one, but I don't think it was there.
Yeah.
And then also just, you're going to judge a book a little bit by its cover and somewhat by its dedication. And I feel like Vince gets this one. To the men and women who serve. It's simple. It's fitting. It's meaningful. Brilliant move. Honestly, even in the first 2 pages of this book, just the inside cover and the dedication, I could tell I'm going to love it.
Yes, definitely.
Perfectly done. It's in good taste. Yeah, we start with something that's going to carry throughout the entire book, Rapp and an interrogation. And so the prelude opens with Rapp teaming up with Bobby Akram at a secret CIA facility. They have a guy, I think his name was Masood Haq, and they have intel that Haq was talking to a key Al-Qaeda leader, Al-Yamani, about some big plan. Pretty nebulous, and Rapp, of course, is threatening to kill him unless he talks. And I really love this scene as an opening, and Vince is also growing and getting even better here at the setting. He talks about the, quote, facility. That's all he calls it. And it's like this country house, I believe out in Virginia. And he said the CIA purchased it in the 1950s for the purpose of debriefing Eastern Bloc defectors. So we already have this idea of this like old-timey, maybe a little decrepit, almost run-down facility. And that's the whole name of it. And he's working with this Pakistani immigrant, Bobby Akram, who is fluent in Urdu, Pashto, Arabic, Farsi, and English, and he's the CIA expert on interrogations. And as often happens, he's going to play the good cop to Rapp's bad cop.
Yeah, I sorry. I like this scene because, as you mentioned, Vince is very good at descriptions, especially descriptions of locations. And I think here, understanding, giving us the backstory on the facility, learning about why it was purchased, and then throwing in, like he does in a lot of his novels, like the history of the CIA and bringing up these little tidbits and talking about Ames, right? The famed CIA mole or yeah,
Double
mole.
agent.
Double agent. Yeah, that's the word I was looking for. Sorry. And then the description of Bobby Akram and how Rapp is good at interrogations in his own way, but this guy is from the clinical psychology point of it, the description of him having the same suit and he only ever saw, to give this impression, because this guy is, high up in the ISI. He thinks he's been taken by other people in the ISI and he doesn't even know where he is. And not until Rapp walks into the room and it's like, oh shit. I'm actually in the United States. Then he's like, I'm way more fucked than I thought I was. But yeah, like this is sort of whereas Rapp is like the hammer, Bobby Akram is the scalpel, the fine tuning to get maximize the amount of information. But when he can't get it fast enough, he lets Rapp go in. He lets the dog loose.
Can I just read this? I mean, can I just give this quote, because this is imagine starting a book with this. The facility was not a pleasant place, but it was a necessary evil in a world chock full of sadistic deeds and misguided, brutal men. Rapp flicked the safety off and pulled the hammer all the way back into the cocked position. So what's it going to be, Masood? Do you want to go to work for me and see your children grow up? Or do you want to die? And meanwhile, there's pictures of Masood Haq's kids laid out on the table. And just to drop open the book that way, I just think that's brilliant by Flynn.
Yeah, no, this was a great scene to start off the book with. And there was even a quote where Rapp was like, because he's showing these kids because he also showed pictures of kids of the CIA people who had died. Yeah. And he's like, this guy thinks I'm going to kill his kids, even though he says in his mind, I would never kill kids. I'm not like them, or I would never do something like that. So the Rapp, again, always gets what he wants, and he does a great job of doing it.
Yeah. Rapp might never do that, because as we talked on this book, he's not ashamed by what he does, but he also doesn't glorify it. So he's showing the picture of the kids, not that he would ever do it, but he knows that's all the terrorists would respond to. He's entering their world of violence, quote, brutal, misguided men. And he's using that to manipulate them, trying to show them, like, look, I'm just as bad as you, even though you don't expect me to be. You expect me to be a sanitized American. We have to interrogate you by slamming our fists on table, but can't actually touch you. He shows this guy, and it's a theme of the book. Rapp's not fucking around in these interrogations. He'll play their game.
Right.
Cool.
So after the prelude, we jump to the raid in Pakistan, which I think is some of the greatest writing I've read, and really engaging in this first half of the book. This is probably tied with the sequential scenes we get with the nuclear bomb down in South Carolina later on that are my favorite in this part, but I really enjoyed the raid in Pakistan. So based on the information that Rapp gets, he wants to go over to Afghanistan and to Pakistan, to this village where it's an Al-Qaeda stronghold. They know that there are like 3 top Al-Qaeda officials that potentially could be there. And so he needs Kennedy to get the president approval. And she's essentially like, all right, don't worry about it. Go. I'll get your approval by the time you're in the air, right? And then we meet this character of General Harley, who I really like as a character. And he has this whole plan staked out. And I think the tactical brilliance and how a battle would actually go down, and how Vince describes, men coming down on the ground and the different, specifications of the weapons and, how they would do that. And then also the descriptions of the weapons that Al-Qaeda would have and, how they're going to, sort of plan against that, as well as like this guy knows that they're going to run into the mountains and he has something waiting for them to surprise them. just this whole plan and this whole attack was just brilliant. And also the guy knows that he's been bugging his superiors to go across border, because this is a mission that is, highly risky. And only this idea of, because Kennedy also has some other intel that we find out based off of like the financial markets, as well as, some chatter that about this, some attack. And so based off of this, as well as the information that Rapp has gained from the ISI agent, she's able to get the president to finally, okay, like we're going across the border. And they don't even tell the State Department that they're doing this, right? So,
well, that's a cool argument that Kennedy makes, and I never thought of this before. She's using all these financial indicators to tell the president, like, hey, look, I've been at this job long enough now. I can tell when something's fishy is going on. And she starts saying there are some financial irregularities. A couple of key items on the stock exchange have gone down by this many points. It's kind of like, yeah, well, that doesn't happen. But then she's able to point out that these are all foreign transactions that are betting against the United States. So all the indicators basically are people, foreign, entities pulling their money out of United States business, and they're basically betting, and they're putting it into gold, and they're betting the U.S. economy will go down. And for Kennedy and the CIA, that's pretty cool that they can analyze that and realize, well, that's what would happen in a terrorist attack. Anyone with assets in the United States would lose out, where if you shielded your assets and pulled them out at the right time, you're kind of protected against an attack or from the fallout after an attack. And she convinces the president with that plus all this other data. I just thought that was a really kind of unique way of going about Kennedy's argument. Shows how smart she is.
Yeah, the president even asked, like, well, is it possible that all these people have the same financial advisor? And it's like, maybe, but why would he be telling, why are they so smart enough to know, oh, there's going to be this huge shortfall? I wonder.
Well, they essentially do, and that financial advisor is the terrorists, telling their people, the people they're connected to, pull out.
Also, I wonder if are these similar to signals that the CIA saw before the attack on 9/11. If that was something, because you watch these things about 9/11 and they all say they knew an attack was coming. They knew an attack was coming, and they never say exactly how they knew an attack was coming. I'm sure it's out there, whatever. But
this book in 2004, I can't help but imagine Vince was using research like that and real things that were coming out about what we did know beforehand, and no doubt the financial markets probably played a role, and that's where he got this from, knowing he was so in tune with current events and what was going on and researching these things.
Yeah, he even places, I like the, because these things are happening sort of outside of real world, but he does place, like he says, Al-Yamani is one of the key, he helped train some of the 9/11 hijackers. I like how he places those little tidbits in here to sort of bring them into the real life.
That's right. And now we have Al-Yamani planning something in this village. He's not there, but a couple of high up commanders planning something, and Rapp's there to find out what it is. Like you mentioned, though, this raid is really written spectacularly well. You have teams coming in on different choppers. You have teams staging shortly outside or outside of the village by a little bit. You have a mortar team, and Vince is writing about how they could place the mortars so perfectly that while the Delta forces are going like guerrilla warfare house to house and cleaning out the Viper's Nest, as Flynn calls it, of the terrorists hiding out, the mortars are literally blocks away. We can pinpoint them so well, making the Delta Force job even easier. Where you'd think mortars are coming in, you want to run and hide. The Delta Forces were so confident in the mortar teams outside the city launching precise attacks, they could do their job easier going house to house. And they almost created a funnel where the terrorists had nowhere else to go but towards the open field out into the mountains. And they can funnel them into there. So yeah, you have guerrilla warfare, street by street battle. You've got helicopter operations. They're moving in, I think, a Marine battalion behind the Delta Force, who's the tip of the spear. Right. You got these mortar teams shelling the city, and it's all going down perfectly until Rapp, high up in the sky in the command center, he obviously, last book, promised Anna. He kind of promised Irene, He's not going to go, full on guns blazing, running into any of these war scenes after getting shot in the butt. He was going to stay up in the command center in the chopper. Well, they get a radio call on the ground that someone's calling for the CIA man, because on the ground, the troops have heard this is a CIA-led operation. There's some higher up there overseeing everything we're doing. Well, they're like, I think he's got to get down here. And so we, as a reader,
they say our special friend needs to come see this.
Special friend. I'm wondering though, what do they want so badly that they're calling this guy down into the scene? Well, Rapp gets there, is brought into this house, and uncovers a bunker. I think it's in floorboards, right? Under some floorboards. Oh, one of the soldiers sees the terrorist looking at it and running away. And the soldier's like, there's something weird about where that terrorist was going. They never run away. They usually confront us, right? Or throw themselves and, throw women and children in front of them and we shoot them. This guy tried running towards this and he was looking at the ground. Well, it was a secret compartment to a bunker. Rapp drops in. There's radio signals. There's communications equipment. And the number one thing, going back to the inside cover of this book, there's a map of DC.
Map of Washington, yeah.
And that's and the kicker is it's got concentric circles. He's got to get back to Washington, got to talk to Kennedy and the president.
Yeah, on that note, I think I mentioned like this whole book is a leveling up events, and this was a page turner, or how I listen to them by audiobook. I just kept on pounding, kept hitting next, and Vince is pretty common with these not huge cliffhangers, but like these mini cliffhangers at the end of books that force you to want to read the next chapter. But I think in this one, it's gotten even better. And like what the scene you just described is one of those that, and before that, it's, Corrigan, like the master sergeant or whatever, the NCO guy who's like, he's got to get here. He needs to see this. That's like the last sentence of a chapter. One thing before we jump to our next scene, there's a little like joke between Harley and Rapp when he's stepping off the helicopter. He's like, just don't get shot. And I thought of like, oh, he probably knows that, last time he led a mission, got on the ground, he got shot. I thought that was funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, and
like you said with the cliffhangers, I just found it when Rapp finds the map in the bunker. I just love this. So just to read a quote here. He moved closer, studying the map that he knew all too well. The rivers, roads, parks, and landmarks were all infinitely familiar to him. Finding such a map in this remote village was enough to give him pause, but in and of itself, it wasn't enough to explain his growing alarm. The margins were filled with notes, written in Arabic, analyzing the weather patterns for the region in question. Rapp stepped back, wondering how much time he had, his head swimming with disastrous possibilities. He had seen this type of map before. It was used to measure the destructive power of a nuclear weapon, and it appeared Washington, D.C. was the target.
Boom. When you read that, you're just like, oh shit, like this is what this book about. Like we're now, 13 chapters in, and, the book's going pretty well. And, like there's attack that's going to happen. I'm engaged, but then once I hear that or read that,
you're not putting it down.
You're like, no, like, all right, now let's go. Let's go.
Yep. The next kind of storyline we're going to cover is what's going on in between the scenes. A lot of the thriller genre, and particularly Flynn, is flip-flopping between scenes. Well, from chapter 1, we see a shady character somewhere off the waters of the U.S., still in international waters out in the Caribbean, but getting close to the Florida Keys and the Florida Straits. From Cuba, I believe he's coming. And it seems like there's this captain of a boat who just got hired, and he takes all these odd jobs and, independent jobs to make some side money. And he gets this wealthy client who wants to come to Florida, simple mission, pick him up, drive him in, routine. However, the captain, going about his day, sees the man come up from the cabin below deck, stands behind him, and we get a really creepy description of this man as he stabs a knife into his back. And the guy who was the passenger takes over the boat, and he has full command. He studied how to be a captain. He knows boating, and he knows the seas. And throws the body overboard of the captain he just killed. Turns out that's Al-Yamani, the terrorist who we had just heard about, and the terrorist we heard plan 9/11. So we're like, oh shit, this guy's in open waters, about to enter the U.S. And another one of those cutscenes that leaves us wondering, where's he going and what's he going to do?
And upon reread, there's a lot of foreshadowing, or at least I was able to pick out a lot of foreshadowing in this book. There's this little description of like this secret flotation device that the guy's wearing that, if you weren't a avid sailor or mariner, you would notice that he was actually wearing like this ring that would inflate. And I was like, oh, well, that's obviously why, the guy lives or is able to be picked up. And that leads, later on in the book that allows them to trace and track. And like, that'll be important later. But, when you're just reading that, it's just, you sort of a throwaway type thing.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed that. But one of these other cutscenes that we get is this, pretty nervous scientist, Zubair, arriving on LAX. And he's able to, he's studied, he's, flown various different pathways to sort of get around coming in. He is super nervous. He gets, gets through security pretty much unscathed. Although there's another foreshadowing moment where, he's like sweating and the guy asks him if he's okay. And, secretly the guy, is telling them to run like facial recognition, which will come play in later. Mm-hmm. And then next we have the cutscene where Al-Yamani he's arrived in Florida. He's in this, sort of wildlife
like
preserve,
like a swamp
marsh, where he comes ashore finally, and he has a contact, this Kuwaiti scientist or student who's studying at UCF, who's there to pick him up. And it's in this chapter that we find out, or he tells us that he's sick because he's dying of radiation poisoning, as well as he shaved his beard in order to change his appearance, as well as he has this prosthetic leg. He couldn't. That's the reason why he had to come in by boat. He couldn't just take a plane because he walks in a very distinctive way that would tip off things. So the pieces are sort of falling into place. We have these but we don't yet know the extent of his plan, and as well as like what's the scientist doing, what's going on.
Yeah, but we have shady characters entering the U.S. by air and by sea, and some really deep cliffhangers. And that's going to kind of, the picture is going to kind of get put together once Rapp starts uncovering more of this plot. And actually with our next storyline, with some interrogations. Would you say, Chris, the different interrogation scenes were also a highlight of this book? I definitely think so. Yeah.
Definitely.
So, we're putting the pieces together, and Rapp, one thing he takes from the mission in Pakistan are these maps and the other intelligence. But Rapp being Rapp, the best kind of intelligence is human intelligence. He's got 5 guys with him that they were able to capture. And they're going back to the U.S. to one of the safe houses. And Rapp is planning out, how am I going to get these guys to sing? How am I going to make it happen? He teams up with Erda, right? That was the name? Yep. Mm-hmm. And he again is working with him to kind of get a good cop, bad cop thing going on. Erda knows there's going to be some shady stuff. He's kind of okay, knowing Rapp's going to push some buttons, but he is not ready for the lengths that Rapp is going to go to. He takes these guys into a barn, and Rapp tells Erda, like, you're going to have to be okay with some level of what other people might call torture here, right? Because we need information. We know there's a bomb. The ante has just been up. The stakes have just been raised. So he takes these guys, bound and gagged, lines them up on their knees, and he's looking at them, and he realizes a couple of these guys are the leaders. They're older, they're hardened, they're radicalized to the point it would take way too long to get something out of them, and we don't have time, knowing we just found this map. So right in front of all of them, doesn't even miss a beat, boom, shoots one of them right in the head.
Yep. So this, the interrogation scenes and, he's like, shit's going to go down. You have to be okay with it. And then knowing that these guys are not going to talk, or at least this Al-Hurri guy is not going to talk, and he's actually probably anything he does say is going to affect me trying to get information out of someone else. So on the fly, he decides, I'm going to kill this dude.
Yeah.
These scenes, I mentioned to this, and maybe we could do a bonus pod on this movie, and it reminds me of a Samuel L. Jackson movie, which is about the subject of torture, and it's about a nuclear bomb, and where he has to do these interrogations in order to find, and it's called Unthinkable. So maybe we could watch that movie, do a pod on that, and
that'd be a good one.
Sort of discuss a little bit more this idea of torture and necessary evils that I think Rapp has to do in order to get information. So
it sounds like a great movie to watch. I bet the premise is very similar to what Vince is going for here, because this one line here tells me that Vince gets it, right?
Yeah.
He writes in chapter 20, quote, "In the safe and sterile newsrooms, in the marble halls of Congress, it was easy to second-guess decisions and find fault. Out here on the battlefield, things were far less certain. Moral ambiguity, rather than clarity, was the norm. What Rapp was about to do would be seen as barbaric by many of the same people whose lives he was trying to save. This was the sad irony of his life, that he would have to kill to save."
Yeah, no, that sums it up right there.
That's Mitch's philosophy, and that's probably some semblance of the truth, wouldn't you say? Like, we did a few months ago the movie of the DCIs and the directors of Central Intelligence, and torture came up, and a couple of them, even being America's lead spy and spy master, they kind of squirmed. They got a little uncomfortable in the interview chair, when torture came up, and like, that's because it's probably real, right? They all know the irony. You would have to kill to save in some cases, and
yeah. And I think if it doesn't make you uncomfortable, then I don't know, something's probably messed up. You're a psycho. Yeah, but this is a topic of discussion that I'm not qualified to answer. But and we could discuss at length how much torture is good torture and what is classified as actual torture. I mean, obviously, killing somebody,
or even
torture.
This, or even just like everyone, I think, would have to agree, when you have actionable intelligence that a nuclear weapon is going to go off in a city like Washington, the bar is raised, right? Or like the standards are lowered of what torture might look like, because if someone like Rapp is going to be handcuffed at the same time, we literally have actionable intelligence of a bomb in Washington, D.C. and a nuke expected to go off. To me, it kind of changes the question. I believe in moral absolutes, right? There's good and bad, but we also have to understand the reality of the world and this gray zone when you're looking at upwards of at least 3-4 million Americans, and then over time with the fallout and the wider radius, even more over decades. Do the games change at all, or do the standards change? I kind of feel they have to be shifted a little bit, like shift the goalposts in that scenario.
Yeah, it's something we could have a conversation on another pod, but
it's deep, man.
There's
deep.
There's this other quote when he's talking, I guess he's deciding about, or maybe it's right after he killed Al-Hurri, but Mitch says he wasn't sure if he believed in hell, but if a place truly existed, Al-Hurri was on his way. I don't know. I like that quote for some reason.
Yeah.
You get a little bit insight into, Mitch is not a religious person, but he sure knows that killing this dude was a good thing. Like, this guy was not a good dude.
No.
Was not going to help him in any way. And
he was a bad hombre.
Bad hombre. But, all right, so he does, based on these tactics, he's able to gain some information, especially from, this youngest of the prisoners, Ahmed. And he's the computer guy. So they're able to gain a lot of information about how Al-Qaeda is, going very low tech, either using, these actual handwritten messages, or also, going to these message boards that are very hard to, because they're so inundated. The NSA can't really, I'm sure they are now, but back in 2004, and aren't really paying that much attention to because they're unencrypted, right? And he also, it tells them that there is a nuclear bomb, and as well as information, they gain information about these missing Pakistani nuclear scientists. And then he switches to Abdullah, and Abdullah is not going to come as easily as Ahmed. Rapp sort of picked Ahmed because he could see he was the weakest link. He was also the one who recognized him because he's the computer guy. He obviously has seen a picture of Mitch.
And Mitch was outed.
Angel of death. Yeah, exactly. But Abdullah is not going to come as easily. And there's this point where it's a concept that's brought up multiple times, this idea of, and I guess that is a problem with torture. Are people just going to tell you information just to get you to stop? And it could be not good information. And this is one of the instances where we see this happening. Mitch shoots Abdullah in the kneecaps as well as this other guy, and then Al-Din, right? And then decides to kill Al-Din in order to get Abdullah to talk. Finally gets him to talk, and he says he's going to come by plane. And we find out that this is not the case. And actually, this hinders their finding because Rapp sends this information back to Kennedy. Obviously, this takes resources away from people. They're starting looking at planes coming in, whatever. And this pisses Rapp off. So much so that he goes back. Well, I think
also somebody on the National Security Council says, oh, if it's coming by plane, that's fine because we have sensors, right? Our airports are so good and we scan planes and it's hard to land anonymously. So people are kind of like, oh, if it comes by plane, that's the easiest way to catch it. And not good thing to tell Rapp because Rapp knows that the terrorists wouldn't succumb that easily. They'd have a way around that or a smarter plan than that.
And then it's not until Rapp and Erda and Erda's guys who are combing through all this intel that they gained from the place that they find these bills of lading, right, for these various ships. And, there's a couple that are left like 3 weeks ago from Pakistan and that are heading to these 4 different ports. And he's like, all right, Erda lied to me. And he goes back to him. And finally, he was able to get the information out of not Erda, sorry, Abdullah lied to him. And Abdullah gets the information that it's actually coming today and it's arriving by ship. Yeah. And it's like, oh, here's one other one of those oh shit moments that, the nuke is potentially already there.
Yeah. And I mean, you don't want to piss Rapp off by getting caught in a lie. I mean, he even says, quote, the call to Kennedy would have to wait until he had the chance to ask Abdullah why he lied to him. And this time, each lie would cost him a finger. Yeah. We got kneecaps, we got fingers, and we got bullets in the head. This sounds about quintessential Rapp.
Yeah, exactly.
He also gets the specific intelligence about Charleston, right? Yes. Initially, there were 4 ports. We weren't sure if the nuke was coming to New York. What was it? New York, Charleston,
Baltimore.
There was one in the Gulf. I think.
Miami.
It was Miami or somewhere on the Gulf. Maybe Houston, actually. But basically, by threatening to cut the fingers off and catching Abdullah in a lie and killing his friend right in front of him, we get more specifics that, no, it's coming to Charleston. It's coming today. And the boat left Karachi 3 weeks prior, so we can actually track. And that's how they're going to get moving on actually tracking this thing down. Yeah.
And there's actually a little bit of foreshadowing for the next book in these lines where he asks either he asks Erda or he asks one of like the guys who are coming to the intelligence and is like, oh, there's information on you here. And he asks, oh, do they have like my house address or whatever? And he's like, no, I don't think so yet. And as I was reading that, I couldn't help to think about the next book and how people do get the address, to Mitch's house, and it plays a big role. We'll talk about that in the Consent to Kill pod. But, you brought this up to me earlier. Before we were recording, we were talking about how one of the good things about executive power was that it sets the stage for the Saudis being these bad guys, and how, we find out at the end, the Saudis were sort of controlling a lot of the things, and this is going to be a through line through this book as well as through, the next couple books. And you couldn't help but think that, oh, the Saudis actually did get Mitch's address and, gave it to someone.
Even it makes Consent to Kill, I know it's next month, but all the more sweeter that last book we had Mitch getting outed by, what was it, that senator, the congressman on live TV.
Yep.
And his identity's outed. While we also have the Saudi royal family having some shady stuff going on. And before that, we had Hank Clark and his maneuvering. And all of that is slowly building up to Rapp becoming more vulnerable. So it's like the payoff at the end of Consent to Kill is so much sweeter because we've had all these books chipping away at Rapp's vulnerabilities, and not his own vulnerabilities. It's other corrupt politicians and other foreign diplomats and other governments that have eroded away. And ultimately, it's going to affect Rapp's personal life in ways that are transformational. So just makes Consent to Kill even more of a landmark novel.
Right.
Man, that's a good one.
It is a good
Washington.
one.
A lot of this book, how would it be a Flynn book without having the political landscape, what's going on in Washington, who's shaking hands, slapping backs, in which steakhouses? And of course we get that. So our next storyline, second to last before we wrap up here, is something going on with the Attorney General. We have Martin Stokes back at the OEOB, the old executive office building next to the White House, and one of his assistants or secretaries, Peggy Steely, and she's a top lawyer. She's very cunning. We hear she's almost like a whirlwind, any meeting or room she goes into. She's a force to be reckoned with. But she has a history of relationship with Martin Stokes, her boss, and so she uses that to get some leverage against being fired by him. So she's playing the political game, and he's playing the political game because he's trying to get recognized by the president for an even sweeter gig. He's your typical politician. Peggy Steely is your typical Washington insider lawyer or political operative. And then we meet Patrick Holmes, another one of these characters. He's the Democratic National Party chairperson. So he's the DNC. He's at the steakhouses. He's meeting with Steely. They're discussing the party and the platform. I mean, Vince again nails the politics. Just listen to this. It's a quote with the scene of the DNC talking to the assistant to the Attorney General. Holmes had learned the hard way that the base of his party meant the 10% who were so far to the left they were completely out of touch with the values of the vast majority of middle America. If they had it their way, they would lead the party right over the edge of a cliff into the great abyss of fanatical liberalism. I mean, apply that both ways. We have extremists on both the far left and the far right, and they're eclipsing the vast majority of Americans, in the middle, the centrists, who have their values, and both parties, both the extreme left and extreme right, are out of touch with the vast majority of Americans. I think that nails it.
I think you could drop that quote right into today.
Exactly.
Vince sums up 2020 in 2004. It just shows you that it's been persistent for a long time. So.
Exactly.
Anyways.
Yeah. Well, the long game anyway, just to wrap that up, is Steely's going to try to get her boss, the AG, on the ticket to run as vice president.
Do you think, I wanted to ask you about that just as you're more of a political guy than I am. Obviously they could spin this as, Baxter wants to retire. I'm sure that would be like the official story. The unofficial is that he's being forced out, and that if he doesn't go quietly, he's going to, they're going to ruin his life. It's very House of Cards-esque.
Yeah.
But do you think that would ever happen? Has that ever happened where someone who changes running mates mid-ticket, like mid going forward?
I believe there was one instance where a sitting president dropped the vice president on the re-election ticket. I believe. Don't know.
You're the history buff. You're supposed to know this.
I don't have that one on the tip of my tongue right now, but I believe it's happened. I believe it's extraordinarily rare. Yeah. Anyway, I mean, legally there's no trouble with it, but I'm sorry, I'm at a loss on whether or not it's happened recently.
Oh, it's okay. You can cut that.
You got me.
Right. So we are introduced to these, we're introduced to Steely, we're introduced to Stokes. While everything is going on in Afghanistan and Pakistan, Mitch is constantly feeding back information to Irene. She obviously knows that what's going on. She knows that something's supposed to happen, and this just causes everything to go up a notch. And this was something interesting. And I read these books, and I actually learn. I do look up to make sure, fact check, whatever. But the stuff that Vince gets right, and then I actually am able to learn from these books, is I had no idea that the DCI could enact COG, enact the continuity of government. That to me was kind of crazy that she had the power, or they have the power to do that. Yeah, and this is exactly what she does. She calls up Warch, tells him that she's doing this, and this whole scene with Warch, the little 5-minute chapter, or couple page chapter of Warch deciding what to do with the president. He decides he's going to take him out by this quick evacuation techniques, gets him into stagecoach, and it takes 52 seconds. Like that was a really cool scene, and just shows you like I think Vince even mentions that in the world of personal protection, the Secret Service are the best. They train for these things. They do mock drills. Have you ever watched the videos of them like driving stagecoach and doing like evasive maneuvers at like Andrews Air Force Base on like the tarmacs?
They're nasty.
They're friggin' awesome. Like the stuff that they can do with the limousine is amazing.
The beast. Speaking of that, though, Warch has another decision to make. He's also playing how it would go over whisking the first lady out, and he's thinking like, all right, First Lady wouldn't accept us going into the bunker, so I got to do this instead. She's not gonna, take well to being told go here, go there, and so he just has a plan in place that has all of that, has a contingency for all of that, and 52 seconds to get a safe and full evacuation of the president. I don't doubt it. I don't doubt it.
Right.
Well, there's one other character and one other location that's really well described. This JCTC. The Joint Counter-Terrorism Center.
Which will be key in a couple books, right?
It's a huge thing. And Vince writes about this out in Tyson's Corner. And it was a facility for both the FBI counterterrorism and CIA counterterrorism to collaborate a little better.
Yeah, work together.
To work together. Particularly after 9/11, a big push was to share intelligence across the board. And so, tapped from the FBI to work there and lead that is Skip. And Skip is going to go on a little later in the book, some other missions and side stories with Rapp. But right now, he's in charge of the FBI wing at the JCTC. And someone else coming there is Steely from the Attorney General's office, because she is one of his advisors for national security and counterterrorism. So Steely and Skip are going to have to work together here on the intelligence gathering side of things, stateside. And then another person brought into the fold of those conversations from a secret DOE, or Department of Energy facility, is Secretary Reimer. And he was a Navy SEAL. And so he brings his Navy SEAL leadership capacities to the Department of Energy, which is really cool because I never think of them as an operational organization. Department of Energy, you're thinking, a bunch of chemical engineers, and scientists. Right. And it's really cool to have this Navy SEAL background guy as the secretary in charge of it. And he's running these NEST teams and these nuclear evacuation and safety teams. And so really cool seeing him lead that charge. But while all that's happening, we get one other bunker that they're contemplating bringing the president and evacuating the federal government to. And they actually get him there. Site R. And like you said, Chris, we learn a lot by reading the books. This is pretty cool that I really didn't know much about. It's a facility in Raven Rock Mountain on the border between Pennsylvania and Maryland. So roughly an hour and a half or so outside of Washington. And it's a bunker built to survive a nuclear attack. And while there's other facilities like Mount Weather for running different federal agencies, Site R and Raven Rock is the one in the event of a nuclear attack where the Pentagon can be fully operational, where right. DOD can have, all things running smoothly. And so the NSC is meeting virtually from all these different locations, coming together with the president at Site R.
Yeah, and we have some people who are also at Mount Weather, right?
And there's some at Mount Weather. I forget which agencies are operating from there, but they get these virtual. Hey, they knew about Zoom calls back then.
I know.
They get these virtual talks so the National Security Council can get a handle of what's going on. So,
right. And so all of this is leading up to our last storyline that we're going to talk about, which is, the bomb and tracking where it is. It's sort of, again, Vince is cutting back and forth between a bunch of different players. So we have, some Muslims who are living in Atlanta. who have this trunking company. They're on their way to the port in South Carolina. Meanwhile, Al-Yamani, he's driving up. He's also going to South Carolina. They sort of go check it out, make sure nothing is crazy. This guy's been, his accomplice who picked him up has been researching and looking at the port, trying to, do recon. And they finally perch themselves in a place where they can actually see the boats coming in. And finally, they see the Madagascar. The Al-Yamani knows which ship it's on, and he's like, "Oh, there's the ship. It's right on time." And the nuke is in the building. Rapp's able to get information based on the stuff that they find in Pakistan. They know that these 4 ships are coming in. They know that there's these 4. They stop looking at airports and focus on these 4 ports. And it was kind of cool that there's this other scene where, Flood is like, all right, I love Flood. He takes control, and he's like, all right, we know where these 4 boats are. 2 of them are still out to sea. One of them's in the Chesapeake, but this one's actually in the port. It's like, oh shit. All right, well, let's send, they send the Nest team down there. There's this short little chapter where the SEALs actually come in. It's a really, really cool, like, just short little snapshot chapter where I'm like, what are they doing? And they go into the boat that's in the Chesapeake, and they come in, they take it down. Like, they even, like, there's a description where, like, the captain is driving, and next thing you know, he sees this, like, red dot, and he's like, he puts 2 and 2 together, like, what the hell's going on? They're able to secure that boat. And they don't
find anything, right, on that one? That one's clean.
They don't find any radiation on that boat. They eventually find out that all these 4 boats did have something on them.
Yes,
and it's
the trigger devices.
Like the fire set, the different explosives. That boat didn't have anything that was in the container in question. Didn't have any nuclear.
But it's definitely a component.
Correct. One of the coolest scenes that I really liked, and the suspense that, as you're reading this, as you're listening to this, was, very gripping, kept you reading, was, when this Hanasek character and Reimer, they're communicating. She comes in. First of all, she tells, like, the FBI agents, get rid of their windbreakers.
Yeah.
Don't want, people don't walk around the docks wearing ties, because who knows if the terrorist, that's the big thing they don't know. Is this thing live?
Yeah.
Will they just decide to cut bait and, well, let's just take Charleston off the map. At least we had an attack on the United States. So they have to, do this in somewhat of a secret manner. Ultimately, this half the reason why the FBI is showing up is half the reason why Al-Yamani sees this happening and, decides to cut bait. He's constantly like, all right, well, and that begins this whole idea of, oh, there's something else going on, which we'll get to in a minute.
Yeah.
But the Nest scene, team scene where they suit up, and I was just geeking out as a nerd. I'm not a nuclear scientist. I'm a biologist, but I still enjoyed, like, the whole science of that. Bringing in these equipment and doing the X-rays, and then again we get this, the sudden little thrillers, and she's like, Reimer, are you seeing this? Take one deeper, and then boom, and then this description of this special nuclear material.
Yeah,
that was just very chilling to me. It's like, oh crap,
it was. And Yamani is watching it. He's sitting on, like, a rooftop or something, and he sees that the FBI is there. And at the National Security Council, one of the big arguments was, do we tip our hand? Because if we order a complete lockdown, we know the ship is in harbor. If we start evacuating and the terrorists are tipped off, can they trigger this thing right here and now? So Al-Yamani, seeing the FBI, seeing the DOE team, I'm wondering, crap, does he have the ability to blow up Charleston right now? And Rapp's argument, because you got to remember, Kennedy actually brings Rapp into one of these NSC meetings, and Rapp says, everybody slow your roll. If we make ourselves known that we're onto this in any way through an evacuation, or if we let the press, Rapp hates them, if we let the press get wind of this and the terrorists find out we're onto them, this thing is in port. They could blow at any time. We just don't know. So Rapp convinces them, kind of slow down, let our teams do their job, let the Nest team, let the DOE go in there, figure out what's going on. And instead of causing a panic, the president agrees and says, okay, we'll let them work. And once we know if this thing is operational, we'll know if we need to evacuate and cause a lockdown or not. And thankfully, the expertise of Hanasek and Reimer figure out, yes, it's radioactive material. No, it cannot be detonated on its own. It needed the other components. Yeah, so they successfully recovered the nuclear material. A lot of politicos back in Washington are celebrating, even on the National Security Council. Some people think it's done and dusted. And we did it, right? That's the win. Now, something doesn't sit right with Rapp and Kennedy. There's some other shady intel. They found some maps of the Caspian Sea, which are going to play a role, Iran and the Kazakh border.
Right.
And they're just not sure. So we have this on the back of our minds, but that's going to come later, because now you have some people who are celebrating that this is all over, and the press gets wind that there was an evacuation. Key government personnel are holed up in these bunkers, and there's a lot of maneuvering to get the press to not cover this and to, in some sense, sneak the president back into the White House and say that everything was fine all along.
Yeah. But I'm reading this, and on reread, I had forgotten like the second half of the book, and I'm like, wow, they foiled the first plot, a little bit more than halfway through. I'm like, what?
Yep.
I'm thinking to myself, what is the rest of the book about? And there's been little breadcrumbs, like you mentioned, these things about pointing to, obviously, Al-Yamani decides to cut bait as soon as he sees the FBI, so that he probably has something else planned. Something else planned. But yeah, I'm just thinking the whole time, I'm like, what's going to happen? And we'll obviously talk about it next pod. But yeah, no, and again, the cliffhangers in this first half were just really well done.
Yep. And one other key thing linking to the second half of the book that happens here is the truck drivers who pulled into Charleston Port, and a reason Rapp didn't want to evacuate. And thankfully, he convinced the Security Council and the president not to lock down, is the truck drivers came to pick up the bomb, and FBI was able to apprehend him, and they're going to play a big role. Again, interrogation is a theme of this book. They're going to play a key role in Rapp and Kennedy figuring out what is Al-Yamani up to next. There's got to be more to the story than this one half-completed nuclear device in Charleston.
Yep.
So it's pretty much where we leave it.
Yeah. All right, so let's get into some of our thoughts on this first half. So we wanted to introduce a new segment to the pod. We haven't quite come up with a name yet, but for now we're just going to call it "What's in a Name." And we wanted to talk about the cover, but we also should talk about the name of the novel. And maybe one time we'll go and we'll talk about the names of the past ones that we haven't done. But let's just start with Memorial Day. So what do you think about the title Memorial Day and how aptly it describes this book?
All right. Well, I guess we should include the tidbit then. It happens in chapter 35 where Memorial Day actually comes up.
Yes.
And unfortunately, for loving this book and it nearly being a 10 out of 10, this title almost came out of left field in the sense that Kennedy looks at all the intelligence and knows there must be a bigger end game.
Yes.
And we randomly find out that the World War II memorial is scheduled to be dedicated. And
yeah,
it's
she was
just
like, I can't even believe
I
I didn't think about this earlier,
But here's the thing. It randomly happens that I think 3 or 4 other heads of state are in town, including major heads of state, Great Britain, France, Russia, I think, right?
Yeah, something like that.
And so I'm like, how did you not connect the dots of this potential terrorist attack the minute you saw the map in the bunker in Pakistan? Immediately your mind thinks we're going to have multiple heads of state in Washington for the dedication ceremony on Memorial Day.
Or the minute that she has like some suspicion about the financial markets, she's like,
yeah,
oh, this is happening Friday. And then immediately the next Friday or Saturday is this huge event that someone could take out not only the president, but, the leaders of, the G5 or whatever, G8. That's a little bit slipping up on Irene there a little bit, very out of character for Irene.
It was a little out of character. It was out of the blue, kind of thrown in there. And so to make the title of the book Memorial Day because of that kind of oddly fitting puzzle piece maybe doesn't land it as well as the rest of the book pretty much lands everything.
Yeah.
It's a catchy title. It just, I don't know if it relates so much to everything and the true plot of the book. It pretty much just relates to this couple of paragraph side note that's mentioned in passing. So
yeah, I guess, yeah. Unlike previous books where there's a little bit of, double entendres or double meanings, there really isn't double meaning. But I was trying to think of what would a better title for this book, and I couldn't really think of one. So
yeah, same here. I mean, I don't mean to criticize something without having an alternative, but yeah.
But
what did we like?
One thing we did, one thing we did like about this was the action. So if you had to pick your favorite action scene so far, what would you say, Mike?
In this half, I have to go with that raid in the village in Pakistan.
Right.
I think having a military operation planned out that well and in such detail was perfect. Like, it was a couple of perfect chapters of writing in the thriller genre. So that sticks out to me. It's where I want to see Rapp, embedded in the Middle East, doing what he does, catching terrorists and interrogating them. That whole sequence nailed it for me. How about you?
Yeah, same. I would have that. And then second to me was the nest scenes, like the investigation on the, coming in. And like I said, I'm a science nerd, so I like that stuff. Yeah, but definitely the technicality that Vince puts into the operations in Pakistan was great. Definitely stands out.
So next question for you. We had a lot of characters so far in this book, and even more to come. Who was your favorite? But here's the thing. We have all these characters, but we don't have the usuals. We don't have Scott.
Right.
We don't have.
We have a lot of new characters to the world.
Yeah. So who was your favorite then? Of maybe not a new character, but someone who plays a role in this book who's not Rapp.
It'd probably be Paul Reimer. I like that, Vince makes him a former Navy SEAL commander. I think he was a leader of one of the SEAL teams, maybe in SEALs Team 6. I forget if he says, but this is some guy, and like you had mentioned, I don't think of the DOE as having people who have this, SEAL team experience. Obviously the SEALs are very smart, and I think, someone who's going to lead these teams, and it's very similar. You have high trained specialists that need to come into a place and do a job. So he doesn't dick around. He gets the job done. I really like that character. But what about you, Mike?
Well, it's connected to that. I would go with the lady, Hanasek. I forget her first name exactly, but she was Debbie, like Reimer's field up. Debbie, I think, yeah. She's actually on the ground. She is no nonsense, smart. She is with it. She's almost the nerdy science version of a Rapp. Like Rapp does whatever it takes to do his job. She's that way for the Department of Energy. Whatever it takes on the ground, thinking outside the box, making the FBI agents take off their windbreakers so they're not, recognized as easily. She was a great character, and she worked well. Like if she was on one of Reimer's SEAL teams, like the way she's on his DOE team, it was a perfect partnership. Their communication back and forth, even in the thick of it, even when they're uncovering nuclear material in a harbor, like the way they communicated so clearly and operationally just was fantastic.
Right. All right, let's get into some winners and losers. Who's your winners of the book?
Everything, man. I mean, this was one of my favorites of all time. Everything Vince did in this book, the cliffhangers at the end of chapters, the gripping action, the military descriptions, the political scheming back in Washington. I think he nails every aspect of that, and just did a great job. So I'm going to leave it at that as my winner, that this thing overall is a knockout for me. How about you?
Yeah, similar to that. Mine is Vince Flynn. I mentioned that this is, I view this book as a leveling up for Vince Flynn. He knows what he wants to write. He knows the type of books that he wants to put out there, and I really like that.
Yeah. I guess one other thing I would add is the locations. The way we get descriptions of this Raven Rock Site R, the bunker we talked about, a DOE site, a secret one is even mentioned, the battlefield description in Pakistan, the Charleston Harbor with the shipping containers. I imagined almost like a video game, right? There was some Call of Duty video game where you're in shipping containers and fighting around them and climbing them. I almost felt that way. I was in Charleston Harbor, on a secret mission to uncover something in the shipyard. I thought the settings and the locations also leveled up for me in this book.
Another winner is No Anna.
No Anna. That's true. Well, that's key. She doesn't hold Rapp back here, or doesn't hold the story back. I feel like Vince's writing can flourish when he doesn't have to deal. He doesn't every other chapter, every 3 chapters have to come back to Mitch thinking, what would Anna be, wondering about this? I think he's free to just let Mitch be Mitch.
Be Mitch. Yeah, and I think, maybe he's learned something here. Not having Anna in the book makes the book better.
Yeah.
Could be something.
Well, there's not much for me, but if you had to give us some losers of the first half of this book, some things that didn't work out or didn't click for you, where are you going?
It's kind of hard to pick a loser in this first half. If I had to, it would be the Steely Stoke line, mainly because we don't get a lot of that. That definitely picks up more so in the second half. But yeah, I guess that's like the weakest part of the first half, if I had to say the loser.
Yeah, I would say that too, although there is a payoff in the second half.
Yeah.
I'm kind of wondering why this Steely character is being given so much page time or words on a page, how much she's been written in. But Rapp does face off with her in the second half, not to give away too much.
It pays off.
And there is a payoff of Rapp, giving it to her. So we had to know who she was for the payoff of Rapp to shut her down in the second half. And the other thing I was almost going to say was a loser. I didn't understand Rapp's argument to not close the port. Why was he so gung-ho on, let's not evacuate? I'm like, there's a nuclear weapon on a ship. So at first I was like, that's weak. Why is Rapp saying don't evacuate, don't lock down? Like, we got the nuke, it's over. But I was being played. I was being played because Rapp is secretly, something doesn't sit well, that there's more to the story, that we're only halfway through the book, that Al-Yamani has a backup device. And so, hint, spoiler alert, there's going to be a second nuclear device. And so I think Vince got me. Initially, I questioned that decision by Rapp. I was like, what bigger fish are there to fry than saving people and preventing a nuke from going off in the country? Let's evacuate. Let's lock down. But there are bigger fish, catching a second nuke and preventing that from going off. So it ended up being a positive in the end.
Yeah.
All right. We did it.
Well, that's our first half.
Second half coming to you next week. And we will go from chapter roughly 49 to the very end. We'll give you our winners and losers and final rating of the book. And one of our favorite segments on the show, our discussion of the covers. So
I'm intrigued to see the cover that makes no sense. Is there one?
So there is one. And by the way, guys, on our social media, our Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, we will be posting all of the covers of Memorial Day. So feel free to chime in and comment and tell us your favorite cover. And Chris, yes, one of those covers will be a random, but I am happy to say there are no power lines.
Okay, good.
But
if I saw a power line again, I might go apeshit.
Okay, but they are replaced by something that might be worse.
Oh, God.
I'm not kidding.
All right. Well, we'll get into that.
They are replaced by something similar to a power line. That is not a power line. We'll leave it at that. All right.
I should be in charge of artistic covers. I would make them actually irrelevant to the damn book. Anyways, as we always have to do, we have to thank our patrons, including our special operator Sherry F. and our special agents George, Matt, Dawn, Dennis, Roman, Peggy, Catherine, Ray, Bridget, and Jeff. Thank you guys very much. Please, can't say this enough, subscribe, rate, and review us on your favorite podcasting platform. You can find us online at mitchrappod.com or using our Twitter and Instagram handle at mitchrappod. And as always, just let Mitch be Mitch. Just a disclaimer, this podcast is not affiliated with Vince Flynn, Kyle Mills, or Simon & Schuster. but thank you to them for bringing us the wonderful world of rap. And the music soundtrack is Guerrilla Tactics by Raphael Crooks.